Housekeeping this morning. Welcome to members of the Education Children's Services Scrutiny Committee and also to viewers who may have tuned in this morning. As far as we are aware, there are no fire drills planned this morning. However, if the continuous alarm sounds, leave the building by the staircase and assemble in Arthur Street car park. Do not hesitate to gather personal belongings and do not use the lifts. Wait at the assembly point in the car park until all clear is given to return to the building. The committee is being webcast. Please, I am here to remind you to press the button carefully once on the microphone before speaking and to switch it off as soon as you have finished. Mobile phones should be switched off as they may interfere with the webcasting equipment. You can leave it on silent if you're expecting an urgent call. This morning we're welcoming to officers in attendance is for item 4 is Delwith Matheson, Head of Service Education Improvement, Kevin Smith, Head of Service Schools Finance. Do we know if Julie Bell's coming this morning? Julie might come in. If she does, Julie Bell is the Interim Director of Education and Skills. We have also got 3 of our young members for the council. Which is, I've just lost you off my list, Ambrin, Thomas and Georgia. Item 1, apologies for and replacement. So we've got apologies from John Withington. We've got replacements, County Councillor Gardner for County Councillor Yates, County Councillor Purcell for County Councillor Clark. So we hope that our 2 gentlemen are getting over the COVID. We've been poorly, so let's hope they'll be here at the next meeting and we wish them well. Item 2, disclosure of pecuniary and non-pecuniary interests. Members, you are asked to consider any pecuniary or non-pecuniary interests that you may have to disclose to the meeting in relation to matters under consideration on the agenda. It would be most helpful if you could specify about which item that you have an interest in and the nature of the interest declared. Have we got any? Councillor Cheetham. Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor May.
I'm a governor of 2 schools.
We got all that. Yeah. Thank you. And if you're not a governor, I suggest you look at your local authorities and try and join in because your input is greatly required within our local schools. Sobia on.
Hello, thank you. Yeah, I'm
Morning,
a governor.
Sobia.
Morning to you, Andrea. Chair, sorry. I'm a governor at a local school.
Thank you. If you would like more information on how to become a governor, if you speak to Sam or send her an email, I'm sure she'll be able to get you in touch in your area, and your contribution is vital to our children. Item 3, minutes of the meeting on the 18th of January. The recommendation is to agree the minutes are a correct record. Can somebody propose those for me? Councillor Sutcliffe. Councillor Jones, thank you. Is there anything you want to bring up? Anybody got any queries now? Happy? Item 4, Lancashire Schools Attainment Priorities Overview is going to be presented by Delwith Matheson and Kevin Smith. The report of the Education Improvement Service includes an overview of the context of education provision and the COVID-19 pandemic. Steps taken to improve outcomes across Lancashire to date, proposed strategies to improve outcomes going forward, including COVID catch-up, Ofsted inspections, outcomes in Lancashire schools and settings since the start of 21-22 school year and an overview of attainment progress. We've got a recommendation that the Education Children's Services Scrutiny is asked to consider all the information as presented with a focus on Ofsted progress and the outcomes and the priorities in Education Strategy 22-25. Good morning. Would you like to present your report, please?
Good morning, everybody. I feel very privileged to be here to share with you some of the progress that's been made in our schools across Lancashire despite the circumstances of the pandemic. And this presentation gives you an overview of the context alongside what our schools have actually managed to achieve. Right. And I know you won't need reminding of our vision that children, young people and their families are safe, healthy and achieve their full potential. And the real premise behind the new relationship with schools is that more children are safe, more children are healthy and achieve their full potential. Purely that, nothing else. That's the absolute thrust of what we're trying to achieve. So we have a developing model, as you're aware, and it's about making sure that our young people in school are better served through adopting this new model. So it's about how we're going to work together, council, local authority, school leaders on this shared ambition. You'll remember also that back in November I was in Scrutiny and we talked about the education strategy and that was approved at Cabinet just before Christmas. And so that education strategy is really sets that political, that corporate priority for our Lancashire schools to deliver on those statutory duties that we hold. And it is about making sure that the collaborative school improvement delivers high quality provision in all areas, addressing that inequality of experience across the county and adopting a warranted variation locality approach. And by that, it means that it's not about treating everybody equally, it's about addressing some of those inequalities to ensure that all people are able to achieve. So it's about using data, it's about using information intelligently, about us working with schools and settings and targeting that support to ensure that there's a partnership approach to delivering the 5 key priorities aligned to our 4 corporate priorities. And those 5 priorities are improved outcomes in early years and increasing that take-home to funded 2-year-old. Further reducing exclusions and suspensions, ensuring that full-time suitable education is there for all children. Improving outcomes for vulnerable groups, including those eligible for free school meals, children in need, children with care plan, and children looked after, as long as those with special education needs support and those with an education health and care plan. It's about addressing the risks associated with rising numbers of effective education where this is not in the best interest of the child. And it's about increasing the number of children and young education, employment, training. And you'll also remember that it's built on those other pillars, those 7 pillars that support the education strategy. So the alternative provision strategy, multi-agency early health, early years, SEND improvement, school effectiveness, school-based planning and preparation for adulthood. So through this approach, we will strengthen local area prioritisation planning in relation to school improvement and outcomes and address those locality gaps and underperformance. We're going to use this team around the school and settings approach to support early years uptake and learning through improved family engagement and learning. It's also about aligning school improvement and government services and it's about that development to ensure strong and robust leadership and accountability across our school settings. You'll also be aware that we're looking at developing our leadership hubs, professions, the alternative provision outreach, ensure that pupils' needs are addressed early, reduce the number of people in fixed term. Children are at the heart of our ambitions. It's about co-production, it's about collective ambition, common principles, shared protocols, effective infrastructure, and strong system evidence and impact. So the focus of today is really to give you some context and background into what our schools have been intending with over these past 2 years, about some of the steps that we've taken to improve outcomes so far, the strategies that we have to improve those outcomes, including COVID catch-up, an overview of Ofsted inspection outcomes, our Lancashire school settings. Start of the school year when Ofsted inspections were settings. An overview, a very brief overview of the years, that can take up to 2 hours itself, and a very brief overview of attainment progress. But as mentioned in the initial overview on what this is about, there were no statutory assessments in place in 1920 or 2021, the end of Key Stage 1, Stage 2, or early years foundation stage. No published data. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, all the summer exams were cancelled. GCSE grades were grades, and I'm sure that our youth council representative will be able to give us a bit more than what that felt like to you. So, context. The figures that you've got there are the figures that relate to the final week before the half-term break. So our schools have just gone back this week. And the figures shown reflect those numbers in that first week of February. We've really seen a decline in cases across the county. And as we finished for half term, there were 20 outbreak positions, so mulling cases. And to that point, the number of confirmed cases, which is updated in the so this was as of close of play on Friday before half term. The number of confirmed cases was 24,724, which equates to 38% of the state schools cohorts. The number of confirmed staff cases, 1,500. The number of schools that have been affected have submitted one of the click sheets to tell us the cases in 469. And COVID-related full school closures this year, so this is since the 1st of September, 9. There have only been 9 schools that have had necessary risk assessments in place. There are, of course, other schools who have had partial closure, so specific classes not being from and they've been taught. So thinking about the strategies that we implement, there is a report on catch-up funding and National Tutor Programme that will be coming up in a little while. And in terms of the other items that are on that slide, the Lancashire Education Partnership Board, 5 locality groups, previously called locality groups, had 3 meetings each to date. They've engaged with a wide range of partners to address local areas and development. Those 5 localities are now referred to as place-based planning areas to align with the health partner areas. The Education Partnership Board also met 3 times since September and receives reports from each place-based locality group. And the team around the school and setting is very much a way of working that's being involved and being embraced by all services. It's not one team, it's not a referral, process, but it is a principle to underpin work. In terms of COVID funding, we invested around £700,000 in 2021-22 for laptops for schools and local authorities support posts, with a further approximately £260,000 from the POM grant. That's the State Outbreak Management. So in total this financial year, you have contributed approximately £960,000 to providing that additional support. DFE laptops constituted approximately another 20,000 laptops to hospitals. It's really strengthened the relationship with families as a result of the actions we've taken. Preschool meals, for example, were distributed by teams across our system, including libraries. The use of IT systems, virtual parents evening, changes to the school day, important catch up through staggered split breaks, lunch times, really contributing to making a difference to enable our children and young people to access learning. We provided a weekly bulletin to all schools, settings and partners. It started off at the beginning of COVID as a daily bulletin to schools, but we've now reduced that to a weekly bulletin. And that provides a range of information, advice and guidance to our school, both from us within Lancashire, but also the national information that's provided. We've had dedicated support for COVID within us. We've provided significant school leadership support and development. We've had regular meetings with head teacher representatives. We've also made sure that we've continued to engage with and vision to ensure that our children and education are well supported, and that early career teachers, so those teachers in their first 2 years post-qualification, are supported and they're partnered with teaching school to make sure that their transition into teaching within school is a fulfilling. I'm going to hand over now to Kevin, who's going to talk us through some of the catch-up funding.
As you will be aware, the DFE, the government, have been providing a number of grants in relation to catch-up. The first couple of these did early COVID, basically what had been spent by schools initially to lockdowns to get to the schools. This means that when we got to the financial year end, last financial year end, March 31st, 2021, a number of schools will have this funding still in their balances and will provide it. Schools will now be through this year. Chapter 2, fully informed premium to collect tutoring grant year. So now to schools. Those come in, so the payments are yet to be payments will continue to the end of this academic year. So the issue that's started to come out from is that there is no alignment on evidence of how to be used. So the early grants just get straight to schools to determine. So in the financial year 2021, 6.7 came in as correct schools. Currently, in the 21-22 year, to December is the same as further payments that's due in that will continue to the end of the year. So obviously, schools are welcome this funding and welcome the additional support. With, but there are some concerns that say the latter two grants. The catch-up grant That has to have evidence similar to PPG. So it's based, so it's being funded on the same basis as a premium grant, and the conditions of use are similar to the premium grant, and schools have to evidence that used it have to provide that support. As I say, that is in line with PPG, so it isn't something that's unusual. So the last tutoring grant is we were concerned from two issues. One is that conversion from 21-22 grant only supports 75% of the costs, therefore schools have to match 5% of the cost of providing that support. Further to that, there is also a template of information evidence that schools need to provide to explain how they have used that. Not all the details have yet been received by schools authority. Is that what they have provided templates and support at this point in time? Schools are concerned about the amount of administration this grant costs. So just how much they have well been this becomes even more where the funding goes from 75% drops down to 60% next academic year and to 25%. Again, it just makes it far more difficult for schools to use that funding to the evidence and all the details of it to fund 20%. So that is what schools are concerned. This is a national, it's a thing that is an authority and obviously we're trying to support them, also trying to be so. But at this point in time, it's just something that's raising into the school system.
So in terms of that, obviously, work really proactively, and we will share practice lessons as we can. In terms of the National Tutoring Programme, I think it's really worth noting that it was seen as a key. Tutoring is being shown to be one of the most effective ways to accelerate progress. And the evidence suggests that a small group of one-to-one tuition to progress. That's from the Education Endowment Foundation. I think to that, that's through SAM. I'd like to go and have a knowledge around it. It's full of a lot of really informative data. Lancashire was the only local authority to be the ethnic minority Gypsy Roman Traveller achievements. One of the tuition partners of the National Tutoring Programme 2021 means that schools have access to English as an additional language tuition. However, EAL pupils catch up with highly subsidised by 75%. 75 schools across Lancashire access. Most of the schools were in areas of social deprivation, and 70% of the schools working had higher than average levels of women. So 558 out of those, 35 of those students were women. This programme is into 21-22. See there, average progress that has been made with those groups that we've been. I'm going to move on now to school leadership and how we've been supporting our leaders. And it is about providing opportunities, training, networks, information, lots of support through growing Lancashire leaders. Functional programme of training courses, opportunities, etc. Designed to develop potential leaders, talent spots at the end of their early career teacher, newly qualified teacher phase. And this is across phase. So this is across. And a new development that can in 2021 and 22 for experienced head teachers is what next? And it's been developed with working with. So we're working proactively with head teachers, with the upcoming leaders within us to develop the programmes that they feel that they need. So we're really listening to what our folks out there are wanting. Several of them, for example, step up connection, Lancashire preparation, middle leadership, Head Start, all require sustained attendance, and they do take place over times. Obviously, during the pandemic, those have operated remotely to ensure that they're able to access. New head teachers, full packages. They have a mentor serving Lancashire teacher, and the primaries have the Head Start programme, and the secondary teachers have throughout their first phase. So to pause at that point, if anybody's got any questions that they would like to raise on elements that they've heard so far before I move on to describing the offset.
Yeah, I was going to. I've got a question about Austin, but you kind of covered that a bit as well later on. You mentioned about the bureaucracy of the grant system. I just wondered what sorts of issues that was flagging. And is it because of a provision of an evidence base on you know, what is being provided within the school? Is that the issue?
It's two issues. One is that it's the thing of collating evidence. What evidence do you need to collate to actually make sure that patients have found? The other concern is that not all team, not all details are yet known. So therefore it's difficult to know whether you are recording everything that you need to do. It's in line with the technologies that inclusion match building is not evidence. Show that what meets the criteria, it's that thing of where you get it from. Yeah, so you've got further bureaucracy of looking at where you've got the funding is coming from, twice this.
So that opens a big wide question then. How on earth are you worried about that then? How are you? What is the criteria that you're basing because you have no criteria or don't have the full picture of what you want to do?
It's not the,
what process are you taking to use that grant system?
There's, as I mentioned, there's a template. The DMV have provided a template, so there is an initial reporting of what evidence is likely to be needed of baseline information to be required. It's just that it's like those things. If you haven't got the full list of criteria, the clarity of everything that was required, it just creates that concern around when have you got all the details? Do you start overreporting things just in case? So it's that level of, it's more the unknown. It may well, as we know, work with the DMV, etc., that when we get to the end, it's perhaps not as bad as expected, but it's that thing of, are you recording what you need to record? Have you got all the evidence you need? Is someone going to come back in 3 months' time and say, well, you should have been right? So it's more, I think, a concern at this point in time. And it's just that, as I say, working with the DFE, to make sure that money and utilising effectively. But it's just that, just trying to make it aware there are concerns, so it's not just straightforward.
My question actually was answered by you, so thank you. I suppose it is just what can we do? How if we have the evidence here that suggests what a good scheme the tutoring programme is, but the schools can't afford it, or the bureaucracy is there, what do we do? It seems really nonsensical that they can't have what they really need.
I think it's, again, if it's different school by school. So there's some schools which are there ready and working on it and being fully informed. I think there's other schools which see it more difficult and when it's not as straightforward. And it's the usual case, if you want the breadth of Lancashire and the range of schools, that there's every school in every different issue, if you mean. That some are know what they're going to do with it, they know they're going to match for, they know what they're going to bring forward, they know they've got things in place. Other schools is it enough? And again, especially small schools, can they use it? And it's so it varies. And if you've got a large scale, obviously secondary school, they've got a lot more knowledge and experience. If you've got a very small price, then you can be at the other end of the extreme, and that's the thing you just.
It just seems a shame that some of our children and young people will miss what they really, really need and deserve because of those very, very reasons.
This is the whole point of Lancashire, and what Del is really saying. I would say it's more Del is said that from a finance point of view, we support everything we can do. The schools have issues about meeting criteria, starting evidence and everything, and obviously we try and support them. From Del's side, obviously it's that thing again of how they can best use things, not pupils getting what they need. I think there is the other side of things that a lot of responsibility is devolved to schools, and it is for them to determine what is the best for their pupils. If there is an issue, then obviously we'll do everything and work with the DfE to try and resolve any barriers that are there. But it's just an issue. It's very difficult.
It's very much different schools and different circumstances, and actually different cohorts within their school. Some will respond differently, and the schools have their systems set up. Some of them will be seeking additional funding to do that. Some of them won't. They've already got it built in, so it is on a case by case basis. But absolutely, we are very good.
Councillor Matthew Salter.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. To be honest, I was going to ask very much the same bring up the same sort of inquiries against the Barnes. So really pleased with the, I suppose, answers we've had thus far. But I was just interested, are we, I don't know, sort of sharing best practice with schools, and to what extent is the County Council in dialogue with the Department for Education and making these points that they perhaps need to consider tweaking their how they set up these sorts of grants. So really it was just to add to that. Thanks for your answer, but could we have maybe even more on what we could do to support schools?
It's one of the things we do. We try and connect with the DfE. We also work with a lot of linking to private voters as well to raise these issues. This is not just a Lancashire issue. This is not just this is a national. It's national public health. The school is national. So yes, we broadsheet through communication of the DfE. We broadsheet through communication of the rest of the authorities that we to lead into the DfE violence. Etc. And obviously we incentivise when we have these questions and raise web to schools that move support and actually information to do something like that. Get a better response there. So we try every method to make sure
And then from my point of view, obviously we work really closely with current finance, but it's also about working really closely with our head teachers and our head teacher representative groups as well, and hearing the feedback that they give to us. We have regular with DfE, and we do give them really, and quite strongly where it is having an impact. So yes, those points of view are getting strong. We do have a really strong working relationship with the Department for Education, and so we do have really good engagement.
Councillor Sobia Malik, she's on the
Thank you. I'm struggling to hear the officers speaking, although I can hear the elected members, curiously enough. So apologies if I'm repeating what's been said previously. Just to clarify, I was interested in what it was that the schools wanted from the local authority in terms of support. So we know what's been offered and the national picture and how that's been, cascaded here in our authority. But it would be interesting to have had more clarity on what the recurring issues are. Obviously, some of them have been mentioned here, but then how we as an authority are responding to the schools to support them. Have we done that kind of analysis? Because it's really about feedback, isn't it? About how we've responded rather than what they've been given and what they're having to do to address the challenges that they face.
Thank you. There are 628 schools across Lancashire, and obviously each one of them is quite different. I don't think there's an identical twin to a school anywhere across Lancashire, and so each one of them is going to have a different outlook. They've got a different group of children and young people within their schools as well, a different set of teaching staff, different leadership. And it's about us embracing those differences that we've got, the diversity that we've got across Lancashire, and that's really important. So, as Kevin suggested, there's a lot of autonomy within our schools, but there's also an awful lot of support there. So it isn't a one-size-fits-all picture, and it's very much of what are the general messages that we're getting back. We gather through things like the around the schools settings, through those locality groups, through the head teacher representative groups, through the educational partnership boards, and through day-to-day contact, to be honest, with some of our head teachers in our school, to gather that information and to react on both a way that is supportive to all schools as far as that can possibly happen. But it's also about reacting and responding and supporting to those individual needs too. Not whether that will have answered the question, but
I think that
diversity.
I think there's a point that's missed in that kind of approach. The holistic approach is obviously sensible, and it's not about negating diversity. It's actually about quite sensibly looking at trends and patterns, because whatever the school's uniqueness, I would be very surprised if we didn't find trends within the schools. And the interesting thing about doing almost like doing a SEF, a school self-evaluation form that schools used to do back in the day, and I'm sure they do some sort of formula of that now. But by doing that, by measuring our output and getting that response from them, it gives us a way of having a better appreciation of one aspect of diagnostic self-awareness with regard to what we're putting out. And even though you will get diverse responses, you will also, I'm pretty sure of it, you will also start to see patterns and trends, and those can be extremely helpful in order to be more supportive in a structured and specific way, as well as enhancing how we do what we do with that kind of informed perspective. That doesn't take away from diversity and autonomy, but it could give an interesting measure of the picture, the landscape that Lancashire schools face. And there will be commonality, there will be patterns, and it's part of how you choose to triangulate. And that's why I was hoping that we might have something a bit more clear about the school's response, because they've had an awfully tough time. And I think a review of school life and pandemic is something that even to survey would be an eminently sensible thing to do, as well as the information that we get at different levels from different boards and so on.
Thank you, that's helpful. In the next section where we're talking about Ofsted outcomes, you'll see that we've already started to do some of that work, so hopefully you'll have some of that answered.
And it would be nice if that's what we've started to do at a subsequent meeting, that we come back and have a review shared with elected members about what the schools are saying. That overview would actually strategically be very important for elected members to be aware of across county, across their district, as well as for yourselves as officers. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person is Andrew Gardner. Councillor Andrew Gardner, please.
Good morning. It's a long time since I've sat on one of these committees. You can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. I was a taxi driver for many years, and one of the things I did was drive trainee teachers around, and it was amazing the stories you got told, because I thought trainee teachers would get the best support ever in schools. I was amazed that teach their peers to do that. What I can't work out here is we've got this fantastic opportunity for funding, and you're telling me you guys are working hard to get it out there and the message and clear and everything. The schools aren't helping themselves. Why aren't they talking to each other? Why aren't they actually sitting down with each other and putting these forms together in groups, like they would teach the kids to do, and go and do a little group together and get this? That's what I can't work out, because this is a massive opportunity, and maybe I've missed something, but every school is the same. Every school has children that we want to teach to the best of their ability, whether it's they're going to go to university and go to Oxford, or they're just going to leave school and they can read and write. That is our priority. How it's delivered in schools is their priority. And if there's this money here, I want to make sure every school is applying. If it's not applying, then they should be in front of us explaining why they're not applying. And that may seem I've flipped the coin over today, and maybe I've missed a point, but what I can't work out is, and please explain if I've missed a point, why schools aren't getting around the table with each other, filling these forms in together and making sure that we're getting all the funding that the government are putting in front of us.
Schools are getting together. I mean, it's one of the reasons why we have Lancashire Schools Forum. So this is where we raise these queries, these questions. And what we're coming to telling you is that the information that we've got at this point in time, we've talked to schools, we've asked them for feedback. This is the feedback we're getting from them. As I pointed out, it's that thing of there's just a concern over the information and the clarity we've got on one of these grounds is the main issue, making sure schools are back to us. And I think it's also it is about teaching, as you said. And one of the things that when schools start talking about bureaucracy, it's the amount of time that they're taking away from teaching to actually deal with bureaucracy. So these are things which the schools are fetching on, and they're coming to us, and we're working with them. So I think it's nobody's saying at this point in time that the funding isn't being used. It's the thing that there are concerns. It's just indicating to you that there are concerns out there that if you went and talked to schools, then these are things that they would raise. At this point in time, as I pointed out, there is a lack of clarity. So actually trying to finalise, absolutely make sure we can give the final answer on this. We're not there because we're not in control of that. The DFE, the government, are in control of the final criteria. And it's with one of the other COVID grants, not the education, it's one of the other grants, is that we kept on going around the same link for 12 months. So it is this thing that we're trying to resolve these things. And as I say, it's just making you aware of concerns which are out there and what the problems are in regard of that. And as we've said, it's something that we are working on as a local authority, other local authorities working on this, some schools are working on this. The various, the various different networks and groups are working on this. But we can't give you a final answer, and we can't give you what the answer is, because we're waiting for final advice and guidance from the DFE so that we can actually resolve anything we can do, and obviously go back if there are remaining issues that we.
It's not that they're not talking to absolutely. But there aren't the set criteria yet that they can actually make sure that they're collecting the right information. That's what it's.
Can I just ask then, so do you know exactly what schools have taken up on the offer and who hasn't?
All schools have been funded. The funding has come in. There is further tranches of the funding to come in over the academic year and future academic years. The funding has come in. The funding has gone out to the schools. The schools have it in their bank account. About to open it. They are now on with working on how they use the funding and the match funding. How they're going to work through it. So that's what they're on with now. As I say, one of the issues is this thing of when they've got the right evidence at the end. So again, it is only kind of fairly recently started. So it is a thing where schools are working through it now. So it's kind of the question has come ahead of the game, so to speak. The question from Scrutiny came. We've gone out and asked schools at the point in time before Christmas where they're trying to work through these issues, the issues of what they're going to do using. Obviously now we're getting to the next stage and through this term next, and obviously they should be resolving these issues and we should be systematically resolving. So the funding is out there, the funding is in schools, it's not anywhere they have put it in their accounts. It is now just dealing with the how schools are using that evidence that they need to get.
Councillor Ann Cheetham.
Thank you very much, Chairman and ladies and gentlemen, and particularly Mr. Smith. See, I always see him in disguise at the school's forum, and therefore I hear another pattern of how funding is being distributed, very much with our colleagues who are working within the schools themselves. So let us not forget, there are very passionate people who are volunteers or work with the teaching staff who sort of say, we need this for this set of problems, we need that for that set of problems. And I have to say, I believe that Lancashire have actually rather excelled themselves in certain areas, particularly with our young people who are in very vulnerable situations. And there we are talking of pupil premium within our primary schools, some of our youngsters who have particular health problems, but we tried to make sure that they have been able to keep a pace with their peer group. And that is where the iPads have been invaluable, because they've been still been able to talk to each other through the technology. And they really have mastered it extremely well, better than some of the adults. Can I thank you very much for the clarification with regard to that presentation, which was on page 17, because I was a bit fooled by the percentages with regard to the overall listening, speaking, reading and writing. Now that's fallen into place, particularly where, again, vulnerable groups have been captured. And I would just like to sort of say, well done to everybody on that score. Now, the other thing I'm also very interested to note, which obviously is going to overflow into our next section, but particularly for some of our schools who have had a baptism of fire called head teachers, who came in last September and inherited the next element of the pandemic. And I have to say, in some cases, I'm surprised they're still alive, even though they've had a mentor. Because it has been in some of our biggest schools, it has really been an absolute nightmare in jiggling timetables and also teachers' timetables. Now, I have to say that my particular secondary school did not take up the option of the summer tutorials last year, because as a government of those schools, we realised what pressure all the teachers had been unto. It didn't matter what the faculty was. Every faculty had some difficulty. And we have to also look after the welfare of our staff within the schools themselves, plus what we call the domestic day-to-day tasks, which usually happen within the summer holiday period. really what was achieved. So I think the next stage is going to be fascinating as to how you work that out. But I do feel that we should give great admiration, because I just think these are hidden people within our schools. Some of the pupils themselves who've taken up cleaning tasks within the schools to make sure that it was ready. Never seen so much antiseptic stuff in my life. But I just also say they've taken on the codes of practice that you need to do. And lastly, but by no means least, I do believe that each district have really kept on top of having their little forum meetings. They're not so little when you've got problems. And some of the, particularly in my colleagues of my area, in our area, we have 3 sixth form schools, plus 2 what we call finish at 16. So we want to on to further colleges of education where possible and practical. But I do think that they have been trying to work together so they can do 1 or 2 joint enterprises. And that appears to have brought forth some quite good results. So can I just sort of say thank you on that. Thank you for some of it, which you've actually elucidated as you made your presentation. And just to sort of say the next half actually will complement really what you've done in the first half. It's like going to the cinema, really. Toilet break, and then we come back for the next session. Thank you.
No, just. I move.
Councillor Jennifer Main, please.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you, officers, for the way you've laid out the presentation and all the work that's going on behind the scenes. So I think, you know, Councillor Cheetham touched on it. Lancashire has excelled, but then it usually does. That's what we expect in Lancashire. And that's why the majority of the schools in Lancashire are still maintained. It's because of the service that the likes of yourselves carry out. So I'm really, really grateful for that. Just going back to the funding issue, and Councillor Gardner said you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. But there's another saying, you can't get blood out of a stone either. And I'm a governor at a school where we are using reserves to balance the budget. We haven't got a spare 10,000 to match fund a government grant. We've got to find other ways to do it. And that's why we're grateful, you know, for the services that you provide in helping us find ways around that. Just a really easy question for you to answer. The Lancashire Education Partnership Board under 5 locality groups. How is the board made up, and how are the locality groups made up?
Just putting together the final versions of information to share with you all in terms of the makeup of those groups, because we haven't renamed them. The Education Partnership Board is a group of head teacher representatives, health representatives, and various other services that we work with across the whole of Lancashire in that multi-agency way. The locality groups have a different, it's a coming together of folk in terms of the schools and officers within various services to address some of the challenges that are faced within a locality. As I said, they're new and they're just establishing exactly what their constituent components form. But it's not a board in the traditional sense of the board. We will share the information with you when we've got the final versions. That's okay.
Councillor Julie Berry.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to sum up some of the excellent contributions we've had both in our offices and from our members. I would like to see early reporting on this fact, particularly on financial concerns we've got. It's great that it's been flagged up. I think it's whatever the challenges are, I would like to see this committee informed about early doors, what is going on in schools, what is the take-up like, what are, again, the bureaucracy, kind of your issues that can be overcome. The last thing this committee wants is to come to the end of the financial year and hear that money's being clawed back to government. So this is a governance issue on our parts, a risk to our children and to our authority. We don't harness that money. That money has got to get spent whatever way, because it's there for the right reasons, and we've got to overcome all these obstacles. So it's about this committee being regularly informed about how this is progressing. Just from an audit point of view, you know, it's imperative that we keep close to this money. This money's not the only way that we're going to improve education in Lancashire, but it's absolutely significant one when a hand's been offered, not being able to take it up. So I'd just like that minuting really to ensure that we keep a track of it. It's really, really important. Thank you.
Councillor Ronwellan, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, there's been lots of discussion about COVID grants and very interesting comments made. I'm sort of quite concerned about money being thrown in grants at schools and them not knowing how to use it or how to be able to administer it. I'm just wondering what sort of support has been given by the council in terms of helping them. Is there a framework provided for them to help them see what uses they can put the funding to? And because it seems to me at the moment we've got this money there, schools don't know how to use it, they haven't got the capability to administer it. And this seems quite concerning really. So what sort of frameworks are there? And you know, is there any help that the council can give in supporting them with the administration? Thank you.
Well, again, we do think, as the Chieftain has said, I mean, we have the Lancashire Schools Forum. That is one of the ways which we connect, specifically do connect through finances and all finances across the board, including grants. It's one way that it's a two-way communication in the getting information. Sorry, from schools about what issues they've got, and feeding back information to schools on what they can do, what issues that they need to be aware of. It's something that's an ongoing process, year in, year out. School Forum went on for, I think, for excess of 15 years. So it's something that there's an established communication channel that way. And wherever we get guidance and that we can support schools, we send it out to all schools. We feed it through the School Forum for forum members to share out. Obviously, they link into the other groups that there are of head teachers and other networks. And obviously, we work Del's team. So, I mean, it's something that's ongoing all the time. So that support network is there. If schools come back, and if there are individual schools which come back and require help, then obviously that's something we do. And again, very much from a finance perspective, from a finance team perspective, it's quite commonly we can't really help them. So in this case, it's all right to say about spending money. We might not be able to help them. It will be more a thing of working with the school improvement team and seeing what are the issues that they've got. So if it is just bureaucracy and it is just about fully informed, that's obviously something from a finance point of view we can do. If it's about where evidence is required, then obviously it's goes more down to school improvement. Obviously, school improvement are out there working with schools all the time. There are other consultants out there working with other schools. So there is a breadth, a network there, be they the head teacher forums, be they the school forum. But as I say, it's something as a finance team under my control, is something that we are there all the time, putting out information, making sure that schools have a voice, that individual schools have a voice, and where we get a school coming back and asking for support, then obviously we do everything we can from a local authority point of view to help them through that. But at the end of the day, I mean, as I think we mentioned already, schools are very much evolved, you know, on their, not on their own, but they work and organise themselves. So, you know, part of that is that we can't, across 600 schools, go out and hold, you know, 600 hands. We are reliant on them coming back and telling us they've got issues that we can then support. So it is some of the onus is on them to come back, and if they have issues, is to let us know so that we can find out what we do.
But I think the other thing to really stress on this is where we do have information to share with our schools, or where we've gathered evidence of really great practice going on, we share that on our schools. We share that on through our weekly bulletin. We make sure that our advisors and consultants working with our schools are aware of everything that's available and they share it with folk.
Can I just ask out of the committee, who is actually on the schools forum? I think Anne's on the schools forum. Is there anybody else? Are you on it, Jenny? Right. All right. Could you bring that up at the schools forum at your next meeting about this, how important it is? And also, I think we should have maybe somebody from Lancashire County Council go out to the school clusters, because the cluster is where all the schools in per borough meet together and you can actually say something. So, go on, Jenny.
The schools forum itself is the decision-making body on whether or not county councillors are on it.
Ah, right. But the school clusters, it's where they all meet together in the borough area, isn't it? So maybe that needs to go and they have that as the main topic on their meeting. So how do we do that? Do you know, Sam? How do we get to the clusters to see who chairs? Do you know? This is something I think that's important that we should bring forward as, I'll put it down as a recommendation.
Teams, etc. So they officially do send those out.
So we could do with having that as a main topic.
It comes out in the yellow book.
So if our schools that buy into Lancashire County Council, we need to be approaching them and the schools clusters to make sure the word's out, to make sure that there is support available for them to apply. So if you know about who runs in your area as councillors, I'm not sure, I'll find out in my areas on the coast, but we need to be looking at that and stepping it up. Why would we want to give money back? Why can we not find the loophole and get round it? Who's been successful that could talk about it in their area? So that's what we're taking forward. Well, I'm putting that forward.
I've just
most important people in each of your Lancashire schools. They are the accountants. They have to list everything. They get an inspection every term. They are monitored very closely. In fact, if it had to be for the schools forum and the personnel, we hadn't realised that we had a very old accounting system and we had some money in it and we wanted to, get hold of it. Then we discovered that there'd been a total change within banking systems. And this came out then at the Cluster Schools Forum. And we found there were several primary schools were the worst offenders in some ways. But I think they are important. And if you are a governor of a school, you can make your little mark at those schools because you're in charge of the management of that school within. But never ignore the school bursars. They are vital. They have everything at their fingertips.
Because we are accountable, so they applied for that role and should also be accountable. So moving forward, we need to look at the school clusters that promote within their own area. So if one person is successful and has found the loop how to sort it out, they should deliver to others so everybody moves forward. So we'll put that on our list. I'm sure Sam will be cursing me now because it's another item on the list. But it's something that we need to move forward in, and then we can liaise with yourself, can we? We come back to you if we want advice, support. Good. Right, who's next? The list is Sorry, Nawida Khan, you're not the last one. You felt the last one. Oh, sorry, Matthew Salter. Nawida, quickly.
Tutoring program. Do we do any, have you got any data collection around the 3 bullet points you put there about schools program, the number of schools that are taking up that, the tuition fund, you know, which schools, what children, what percentage, you know, of the diversity of different ethnic groups. Because it says here that the schools are subsidised. So are they actually using the money effectively? Are they actually, what I'm trying to say here is it being used effectively for the children that need it? Because we still have children that, as you know, refugee children and children that are from asylum seeker families that still, I find from experience, have not had the opportunity of, before they start school, of accessing English provision. So it's just whether that money is being used effectively and wisely.
So, as it says, 75 schools across Lancashire are accessing that subsidised EAL tuition. Most of them are within our areas of deprivation, greatest deprivation. 70% of those schools we worked with had higher than average numbers of premium. There were 135 of the students that worked with premium students and 58 of them students with special education. All the pupils undergoing that tutoring had English as an additional language. And although being bilingual is not an advantage in itself, it should be celebrated. Low levels of English can be a barrier to access. The programme is continuing into 21-22, and the pupil progress continues to be tracked using nationally recognised EAL assessment framework. And pupils make progress in all 4 areas, with those at the earliest stages of learning English making fastest progress. So engaging with the programme has meant that £128,786 and £50 funding was received, which has been used to subsidise the costs across all of those schools, possibly reduce the costs for all those schools. So yes, there is a considerable amount of data and information there. But again, this is a programme that continues to grow. And in addition to this, don't forget, we also have the East Lancashire Learning and Information Exchange, which has been set up in the East of the county to support those young people coming in from out of the country into East Lancashire and to gain those language skills and that readiness, that preparing us for entering an English school, and more specifically a school in Lancashire. So there's lots of things outside of this particular funding route that were in place to support.
Councillor Matthew Salter.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just wanted to come back briefly to the comments Councillor Berry made and that she's asked to be minuted. I guess what I wanted to say is I didn't necessarily agree with what she had to say, or at least I feel that we need to look at it in a slightly different perspective. So we need to be mindful of the fact that we are talking about public money, and where that does become available from the government, it needs to be spent as well as possible. We need to be looking for value for money and for the greatest positive impact, given that it comes from taxpayers ultimately. Now, I happen to believe that education is one of the best areas that you can possibly that you can get that value out. But I just think it's the wrong approach to say, that if there is this government money, we need make sure it's spent however it can be spent, and be thinking, that it should be spent on anything rather than it being clawed back. And I think the focus needs to be on how can we get the greatest possible benefit for the people of Lancashire. And at least when we're thinking from that mindset, and we are looking to get the most out of it, you will find ways to spend it. But it's just that I felt maybe philosophically it wasn't quite the right way to think about it. And I wanted to put that across as how I would see the issue.
Just come back. I wasn't ever advising that we spend money at all costs. This money's coming and it's ring fenced for specific, intervention. So let's just be absolutely clear about that. But it is, like, you're quite right to come back about the emphasis that it is extremely important. This money is public money and our children are precious. I just want to make sure whatever way we deliver those projects, those, the government's initiative, got to be successful, because we can't be just looking at something being clawed back because there's been an inability to, despite all the support, the financial and the school advisory service and the clusters. Let's just hope we're in a better situation.
Councillor Stewart-Jones.
I had some questions on page 11 about children who to have a neighbourhood to thrive and develop. I wanted to know if there's a link, how you measure it. So say if somebody's in fact going to secondary, going to post-16 education, is there any way of you seeing how that sort of intervention and funding has helped? That's the first question. Second question is about COVID catch-up. Do we have a time frame for that? When is that going to be completed? How that's getting on? Then I had a third question, which we didn't have before, but it was a very recent one. And I'm very concerned about the school-led tutoring grant, about the fact that the schools, have to find 25% of the funding. And I presume this applies to academies as well as maintained schools. And I agree with Andrew that actually, if the schools are talking to each other in the forum, are they also working together so they could do a joint event to get the match funding, to see what I mean? So actually, if they are talking together, are they then working together? So for example, in my division, there are two primary schools here and here. Yes, they're talking in the forum and the clusters, but are they actually coming together with creative ideas on how to get funding? Because our children, their education is built them for life. We go through a process of lifelong learning, so it's such a precious time for children. Let's not say, oh, well, we can't get the funding, it's bureaucratic, it goes down to 50%. That's the case. And I think, with the Department for Education, yes, we don't know quite how the funding is. It's brilliant, you've got the template, but let's get the schools working together sort of more. I know one size doesn't fit us all, and that's why we have maintained schools and academies, and they all do their own different thing. We've got diversity. We've got a very mixed setup in Lancashire, but we are a beacon authority. We are doing very well. We have exceeded, which we'd expect ourselves to do. But let's get the schools working together even more than they do at the moment on how to get the match funding, how to do the other things I've already mentioned.
On your first question, it's too soon to know. We're not back to, I'm going to say normal. I don't think there ever will be the same situations we were in before. There have been lots of positives to come out of COVID in our schools, not least of which is that what Councillor Cheatham said in terms of that IT. So there are some real positives about doing things differently. It is just too soon to know. And the impact of COVID on our children and young people, the way in which we work, will be felt for years to come. So I think that also goes to the second part of your question too. That I have a crystal ball. It's something that for sure we will be measuring, for sure we will be looking at, and we will plot those trends across our schools, as the schools will be individually themselves. In terms of the last element of it, yes, of course, we will be sharing, continuing to share good practice, schools continue to share. Schools are really good at talking to one another, sharing what they have. And there are very active groups that work together, also across the country. This isn't necessarily like a element at all. It is where they are working together to make sure that they have the best possible outcomes for our children. That's my education.
Finally, I'm going to try and keep over there. Thomas, will you want to speak? If you don't have to do it, press the button and your mic comes on.
Yeah, I had two things to bring up really. This is a bit of an old thing as well. When I was in primary school, basically, I was diagnosed with Asperger's, and my primary school actually got a bit of money to help with that. And as far as I know, nothing with it, like to actually assist me with it, because it was given by CAMS, I believe, to get help for it. And there was another person who had learning disabilities in my class as well, but she actually got funded. And basically, I was just wanted to know what is being done to make sure funding is being used specifically for what it's meant to go for in schools. And then also about the school forms and the fact of Lancashire County Council is not involved completely when even though like the county owns the schools, but they have to be elected onto the school form. Seems a bit confusing that they don't have a proper say in it.
Thank you. It's a really good point that you make about the funding process. Hope they have a specific diagnosis, a condition, or have a need through. I'm probably not the person best placed to give that one would be through our inclusion service, and so that might be a good thing. Sorry. And the second part of it, was that about the school forum itself? And
Can you just repeat what your query was about?
From what I understand is to get a county member to have a say in what happens in the schools in West Lancashire, North Lancashire stuff. You have to be elected to go onto the form. It seems a bit confusing that the county themselves can't just be involved mainly in its entirety.
Right, if I've got your question right, tell me if I don't answer it wrong. The forum is a certain size of about 60 members on the school forum. That includes a number of councillors. Those people have to put themselves forward to be on the school forum, and then have to be elected. There's certain bodies such as the councillors which automatically get to sit in. There's a certain number of seats, so not all councillors, but there are a set number of seats. And the parties decide who their representatives is going to be. The full forum, so the working groups tend to be just for the members which are specific school forum members. There are other people who kind of looked it on to make sure we've got the right breadth on the working groups, to make sure there's representation proportionately. So for an example, on early years, there's only about 2 forum members, but we've got about 20 people in to make sure that they represent the various different providers of early years, as an example. The full forum is a public forum, so as Jenny was saying, other people can come along to it. It is a public meeting, and obviously chair be involved in it. You would be observers of that, but obviously if there's voting or things like that, then it's down to the actual members. So there are ways that people can be involved, and we do try and make sure that the forum has a very wide, broad membership. And as I say, on the work, more so on the working groups where most of the work is done looking at issues similar to what you're saying, using timings funding, things like that, is to make sure we have got primary schools represented, secondary schools represented, short stay schools represented, that we've got representation across the board, both from the governors and head teachers. But the forum itself, the full forum, which is about once a term, that is a meeting so that people can attend.
Right, thank you for all your questions. We'll now move on to part 2.
So, Ofsted. Ofsted resumed their inspections of our schools and settings in September after a pause for COVID. There's a revised inspection handbook and guidance from September 2021 onwards. And that really covered the COVID-19 transitional period, inspection interval throughout the pandemic following that. It contained updates on harmful sexual behaviour, formally exempt schools, the new early career framework for teachers, careers information, education advice and guidance. And it also included updates to reflect how Ofsted will evaluate the use of tutors, for example. It also included updates that teacher assessed grades and centre assessed grades from 2020 and 2021 won't be used to assess the impact. That Ofsted will take into account any transitional provisions when looking at curriculum. There were also changes to good grade descriptions for leadership management and sixth form provision, and the implementation part of the good grade descriptors, quality of education and early years education in schools. So in preparation for those changes to the framework, we provided courses, briefings for leaders and governors in the autumn term, and they continue in a more bespoke way for our schools. Section 5 inspections are then normally inspected under a Section 8 inspection approximately every 4 years. During 21-22, Ofsted is inspecting good schools last inspected during the academic year 2016-17. So it's about 5 terms later. From September 22, good schools will be inspected around 3 to 4 terms later. And for formally exempt outstanding schools, maintained and academy, primary and secondary judged outstanding, including Berta academies whose successor school was outstanding between May 2012 and November 2020. They were all exempt from the elections. And following a change in regulations, all outstanding schools are now subject to routine inspection. So all formally exempt schools, so those that are converted to academy status and were formerly outstanding, must be inspected first of all 2026. So in terms of where we're at in Lancashire, so far there have been, this was accurate at the time of writing, 63 schools maintained nursery inspection since the beginning of September when those inspections resumed. Each week brings additional notifications of more inspections. And for example, yesterday, the first day back after half term, there were 3 such notifications. So they will be undertaking their inspections within school. Of those, there have been 50 so far published. And it's worth noting that the Ofsted sent an electronic version of the report within 30 days of the end of the election to the school. And in most circumstances, they will publish the final report 38 working days of the end of the inspection. I'm really heartened to see the general upward trajectory of our school in this context of significant challenges. It's really impacted on staffing. It's impacted on the well-being of all the staff within the school, as Councillor Cheetham mentioned earlier. It is about making sure that despite this, our schools maintain their focus on developing their curriculum, striving to make improvements for all of our children. Of particular note are the schools who have moved from requires improvement to good despite the pandemic, and one school, Liverpool Park Primary, has achieved outstanding judgment. There's also been really positive feedback both from teachers and from Ofsted on the quality and the value of the support provided by the local authority. Of the 15 published reports so far, within our secondary schools, 2 have improved from requires improvement to good. 2 have declined from good to requires improvement. And we are obviously important place for those. 2 have declined from outstanding to good. Given the change in the requirements for a good judgment within the Ofsted framework, and given the fact that those schools were previously inspected more than 10 years ago, it's been significant change within the leadership within schools, but also the impact. Within our primary schools, of those published reports so far, 5 have improved as improvement to good. 1, as mentioned, has moved from good to outstanding. 1 school has moved outstanding to requires improvement. Again, this is a school that we were already working with and has seen some change in its leadership. It was last inspected in 2012. The remainder of the schools have retained their judgments, their previous judgments. Within the early years childcare and education report, you'll also see that in September, there are 4 inspections there that are marked as met, which looks like an unusual phrase. These are where no judgment is made, there are no children at the time of inspection. So just making it back to the summary position. I mentioned earlier that we've been looking at some of the themes that have been emerging from those initial inspections. Bear in mind that, as it says, there have been 63 such inspections so far this academic year. So it's a small sample as yet, but that's approximately 10% of us. So the themes that we've seen in our schools that are showing are that the curriculum is really well sequenced, that pupils are progressing well through that curriculum, and leaders are really taking action that improve outcomes from previous inspections. Also, that we and one of the things that they're looking for in those inspections are, for example, this promised Do children and young people learn to read fluently? Are the books well matched? Are the bottom 20% given strong support? So the answers are yes, schools doing well. Where it's no, then that's the next step. And of those schools that have declined, we work directly with them, either because they buy into our services or because we're alerted to that through our monitoring and intervention team, and we're working with them, challenges they face. We work with both those schools that buy into our services and those that do not. For all of those possible areas of weakness and areas of development with our school, Lancashire has an extensive offer of continuous development. And schools are supported, as I said, by individual advisors and by consultants, but also can include additional bespoke professional development and support to all those schools. The other element to consider is also within secondary, it's about making sure that the curriculum is really ambitious for our children, and that leaders have got those really effective systems in place to check on how well the teachers are delivering that planned curriculum. And it's about the quality of provision for those young people with special education needs. It's about support for reading, but behaviour systems as well. And really importantly, that governance challenge again, it's that mention of governance, of the role of a government. Governor services are also supporting those schools identified having weaker governance, including signposting training, consideration of strengthening additional members. So that's one of the things of education. I'm going to move on to early years as well, because I think early years is a really important element of what we've been embedding within the education strategy. You will have heard that we've got a real drive to increase the numbers of those eligible 2-year-olds and the take-up of the offer. We've put in place support for early years provision to remain open and to continue that delivery of high quality childcare. It's based on the summer term and the autumn term figures here. What you can see here is an improvement in take-up from 62% last January to 86% this January. Horrible period. We've put in place a huge amount of and campaign to increase the take-up of places of childminders and nurseries. It started in December 2021 and it ran all the way through January 22. And that included outdoor advertising, bus advertising, seeing the adverts, the backs of buses. It included kiosks, community 6-sheet advertising in locations that have low take-up, for example. We had TV advertising, we had Facebook and Instagram. We used all methods we could possibly think of to increase that uptake. And of course, we've still got a way to go. We'd really like that to be 100%. And we continue to strive to increase the take-up in all areas. So you'll also see in the comparison data here, the shaded blue shows well on the screen, but the comparison there, what you've actually got are the actual numbers of children taking up that funded place. of those eligible 2-year-olds, 86.4% of them taking place. That's 3,833 2-year-olds who are now in 96.8% of it is good or absent. That's a really positive story. And looking at the 3 and 4-year-olds also, we've got 98.2% of those eligible children taking place, and of those, 95% are within a good or outstanding. I'm just going to give a very brief overview of attainment progress because, as I said right at the very beginning, there were no statutory national assessments data collection for either 1920 or 2021 for end of key stage 1, stage 2 or the early years foundation stage. National data where it is published is gathering data from schools nationally, and it's through a not-for-profit community interest company owned by all the upper-tier local authorities in England. But again, we can't use this data set for true comparative purposes either. Phonics data was collected nationally in autumn 2021 and 21-22 and was a statutory requirement for year 2 pupils. But the administration of that phonics assessment in schools differed to that in previous years and was not subject to statutory monitoring. So again, this is not directly. The source of any data for secondary school outcomes for 2020 to 21 is the DFE release, which is collected directly from bodies, and that contains all secondary and mainstream schools academy resources. In terms of the outcomes for our children within our language schools and settings, the phonics, with the data that we have, many only resumed education in school in September 2020. Phonics assessments took place for pupils in year 2 for year 1, 1920. So the outcomes need to take into account this context. For Lancashire in 2021-22, percentage to match the national, match the figures, 77.5%. There is no comparable. In 2021, 78.4% reached the standard Lancashire against the England average of 78%. So we were in line with the national. There was no statutory monitoring. The key stage 2, as mentioned, there were no statutory assessments that took place. In key stage 4, for English and maths, most indicators were in line with national. We have data around the published outcomes for key stage 4 grades 9 to 4 English and maths. And for 2021, across Lancashire, (81.4% of young people in Lancashire achieved level 2 by the age of 19, and 58.9% achieved level 3. The national comparators of 81.3%. Participation continues to improve. Within key stage 5, from 92.3% March 2020. That was 93.4% March 2022. And it is above our statistical levels, West, and the national averages. At 88.8%, participation by young people in education, health and care plan above the Northwest, but slightly below the national. At 89.9%, participation by young people in special education needs above the Northwest and national plan. We've seen a notable improvement in not in education training and the not known 3-month averages. And these have moved from 6.9% in December 2020, 5.8% in 2020. Our position has improved quite considerably, now better than the best national average, and places us third compared to us. Do need to continue both on our not known position and the overall position. That's why that education training and priority education strategy just so. In terms of colleges, which I think is really important to raise here, colleges are using the 16 to 19 tuition fund to help mitigate disruption to learning arising. So this touches on Councillor Jones about how we're going to see that moving through. The funding is to support small group tuition, English, maths, and other subjects which have been disrupted. Students aged 19 to 24 with an education, health and care plan are also eligible. It's aimed at students not achieved a grade 4 or 5 in English and or maths, and those who have a grade 4 or above in English and maths are a disadvantaged area and need that catch-up support. Colleges in Lancashire are providing excellent students in relation to catch-up provision. I've recently spoken to every one of them. And those whose central assessed grades may not quite reflect their actual level of learning skills in certain areas, they've really put plans in place to support that. And examples include additional support being provided rather than students needing to change courses or drop out. Multifaceted support is being provided as some students have gaps in knowledge and some wouldn't have achieved GCSE. Colleges are helping fill in these gaps by using diagnostic to identify the needs of individual students. English and maths focus groups are being provided to give that targeted in line with the subjects that they are following. And subject-specific catch-up sessions being provided, small group tuition sessions. In terms of our children looked after, we have some preliminary validated data 2021, which is why it's on this plan. There has been an increase in average attainment score 20 to 21 of 11. An increase in the average attainment age scores for subjects of 9. It's unvalidated. That's why we're not pushing it at present. It may not be complete until the end of March 22. What that is. In terms of the year, percentage of year 12, year 13, education, employment and training for that particular government. 79% in December 2020, 80% percentage of care leavers education from 18 to 20. In December 20 to December, that's now in December 20. In terms of care leavers, there is not known education. That has gone 5% October 2020.
We'll open up now to questions. I've got Councillor Matthew Salter first, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I've got a couple of questions. So one of them is on page 20. I was interested, it says that the vast majority of school and maintained nurseries have remained at the same grade that they were. So I was interested in knowing what are the overall numbers of outstanding, good, etc., so we could have an understanding of that. Also, it was suggested that the reason for some of them losing their outstanding status, there was small number anyway, and might have been to do with the pandemic. So I was interested in whether we could have a little bit of information on why that was, and presumably Ofsted will have taken pandemic disruption into account in some respects. So I was just hoping for a bit more information. I was also interested on the previous page, on page 19, that amongst the changes, the Ofsted criteria, there's a new section on harmful sexual behaviour, and again I was just interested, could we have a bit more information on I suppose that problem, awful problem that they're trying to address, and how the Ofsted criteria is seeking to address that.
Thank you. They're really great questions. And in terms of the detail around the changes to the Ofsted framework, I think that's probably better served through a bite-sized session with councillors. Just that. Because there's a lot of detail in there, and there's probably too much detail to be able to go into right now in terms of the nuances, perhaps, behind some of those changes. In terms of the overall numbers, we haven't got them with to. They change on a daily basis, obviously, as inspections take place and reports are published. Nevertheless, the vast majority of our schools are good standard. We have a very, very small number of schools to require, and we are working with them through monitoring. The summary position is that it's a pretty strong position across Lancashire. We have got, to say, a broad picture of improving schools, and in those circumstances, for example, where I was talking about the schools who had declined in their Ofsted grade from outstanding previously, bear in mind that school, one of those schools we were talking about, was last inspected in 2012. It's not an inadequate school. It's a school that requires improvement to become good, and it is receiving.
Could I just have a little bit more information then on the two that went from outstanding to good, and the two good from to requires improvement, just in how the pandemic has affected and fed into that?
Again, that's giving a specific detail on individual schools, which I wouldn't be giving in this kind of forum.
Or could you make a general comment then about how pandemic has led to challenges that have meant that schools have found it harder in terms of this round of Ofsted inspection?
I wouldn't say necessarily that those 4 specific circumstances are directly attributable to COVID. There are many reasons why a school on the day during an inspection demonstrates a different grade to that is that's why I was giving the overarching view. Generally in schools that are declining, some subjects didn't have clearly seen knowledge or progression. Subject leaders perhaps didn't have as much ownership of the curriculum they had done previously, or it wasn't as effective as Ofsted would have wanted it to be. That reading perhaps wasn't taught as coherently as all of those things contribute to that. So I'm not going to go into the individual circumstances of each of those schools' specific Ofsted reports, but those are overarching things that schools that have declined, and very, very few of our schools have declined, to stress that point.
Councillor Stewart-Jones.
I just wanted to find out how Ofsted works in a sense with the inspection. So, for example, the CQC went to visit Blackpool Victoria Hospital and did a surprise visit. My local primary school had a surprise Ofsted inspection. My priest was like, "Oh, Ofsted visited us yesterday." I thought, "Okay." And he looked and said, "Do you know anything about it?" And I was like, "No." So obviously schools get inspected regularly and they know in advance. What would be the reason in general why they would have a surprise inspection?
There are quite a few reasons why they might have a surprise inspection, and sometimes it could be, well, all inspections, I suppose, are just notified the day before. There isn't the previous sort of system that used to be, and I know speaking as a former teacher, you'd have advance notice and you'd spend sleepless nights making sure you had all your paperwork in order, which you did because you were really good at what you did. But nevertheless, the new system is the phone call, and then you go through with the Ofsted inspection, the head teacher and the leadership of the school go through that conversation with the lead inspector. So there's very clear formats in place and procedures that are in place for that Ofsted inspection. And again, it might be something that we could roll into a bite size about how Ofsted operates within our schools and the sorts of things that they are looking.
Councillor Rupert Swarbrick, do you want to come back after you've listened to the early years, 2 years? No, but did you want to come back on anything? I think you might have had a question that was previous.
I did. Thank you.
No, I'm still awake. I mean, it's really good to see this take up on the 2-year-olds and 3 and 4-year-olds, but in the settings that I'm aware of, there's been a massive hole, and the reception classes, certainly in my patch, are really struggling with what I call school readiness behaviour. I put it slightly more agriculturally earlier on today, but and I don't know whether there's any interventions that we can put in place to assist with. Basically, it's a lot of challenging behaviour, and I think there's I've got to be really careful what I say, but I think there's some challenging. Parents have got challenges about their children and behaviours and being ready for school, and there's a lot of language issues as well. So there are some. We've got some non-verbal goes to school at the age of 5. That's got to be a COVID thing, isn't it?
Thank you. That's a really good point, and it is something that we are absolutely picking up within our locality groups. That's a message that we're getting across in terms of that school readiness within our foundation stage classes. One of the best things that we have tucked in our pocket is the fact that the majority of our early years provision is good or outstanding. And it's about making sure that we've got our eligible 2-year-olds, the 3 and 4-year-olds in that good and outstanding provision, make sure that they have the best possible start in life. We're all working proactively with health colleagues, with social care colleagues to make sure that we are promoting that uptake and making sure that we have got our youngest children in our really excellent provision to make sure that they are ready for school. And it's ready for school in more than being factory farmed. It's about all of the whole range of skills and abilities that they need to be able to start school effectively.
I was just putting you down for the nursery visits to do an inspection. Councillor Jennifer Main, please.
Thanks, Chair. I want to go back to the figures that you've got for NEET, children looked after, because you didn't quote figures, you just quoted percentages. And with a relatively smaller cohort, I think sometimes percentages are not really very meaningful. So I wondered if you'd got the actual figures. Is there any chance we could get them?
Question, what's not for education? Today, oh, that's fine. Yeah.
Thank you. I think you've covered most of what I wanted to raise. Comes the sources questions. I think it's really positive what's here. It's really easy to focus in on the 5 that have declined, but actually what an amazing picture that you paint here of improvement, and that's wonderful. That's really good to have. The 5 that have declined, you said that there may be some overarching themes of decline there, so it would be really nice to have those. If you could do some sort of bite-sized briefing, that would be to have that. You talked about descriptor changes for the good grade descriptors. Is that purely for leadership and management, or does that in any way feed into any of the decline? Is that what I'm saying is, if the descriptor is changed for the good, has that meant that any of the schools have struggled to achieve that because of the way that's been described? Does that make sense? Does it fall into a different, where schools have previously attained good because of what they were doing, has the description of good changed what they're actually achieving?
In some cases, that may well have been to that. I wouldn't state that that's a huge one.
Young members, are you ready? Amberlynn?
I've got a question, but I also want to say something from a young person's point of view of Ofsted. So you said that they get notified the night before, right? But they tend to like prepare a week before Ofsted inside schools. Like they seem to know that they're coming. And also the school changes when Ofsted comes in. Like all of a sudden, it's the most perfect thing you could want in life. Like, yeah, it's just it's not a true representation and picture of your school or college when Ofsted comes in at all. So that's something that maybe can get worked on somehow. I don't know how you can do it, but maybe. But I recently just joined Burnley College and they've just had an inspection, but they haven't had one in 10 years. And a lot could have happened in that 10 years. They were outstanding 10 years ago, but like you said, there's ones that have dropped and come up. Like, why did it take that 10 years?
Ofsted are a separate organisation. They stand alone. They're separately from for education, and so they have their own policies. And it's the policy of the organisation. It's just a policy. Why they do things in the way that they do. it's quite a complicated way that they're separate and yet parallel within a structure of the civil service. So they perform a different function. In terms of schools knowing beforehand, they genuinely do get a call the day before. They don't know beforehand. So unless a school has a suspicion, and it may well be that they've thought it's been a while since we've had one, we must be about due. When I talked about the number of terms and years between inspections, they're probably aware that they're in the window where they could be inspected, but for sure they wouldn't know until they got a phone call.
So Amber, are you putting forward that they should just have a visit at 7 o'clock in the morning of the day it's happening? Then they'd be able to
Yeah.
count all the staff going in. She's going to sit at Parliament on education. I can see it coming. Thomas.
I was going to also add on to that as well, because it's a similar thing with my college, because about the week beforehand, it would be, they'll just have random BBC news up. Then the week it's time for Ofsted, they've immediately got mental health awareness, pride group, special gym membership at the gym near us. And it's like, it's so different from how it actually is as well. And it doesn't really give a good representation. And it's a bit confusing with my college as well, because I checked on Ofsted as well to see the report for the college that we had one the other week. This college has been open for years, and the website just says no reports found. They had 2 campuses at one point in early 2010, but that closed down because they got joined with Newcastle. So they moved onto a single separate campus in Scottsdale. That's been open for about 10 years, but it's no reports found, which makes no sense.
Again, that's going back to some of the changes that Ofsted have brought in terms of the frequency of their inspections, and previously outstanding institutions, school settings, not routinely inspected. They don't.
Do you have a student council then in your colleges? Where you can put your voice forward, where you can say what you think about it?
A person from each class representing either our year in the course or just our course.
Maybe you could ask the questions that you've asked today. Why is it so different? Why are they not on the ball? Why are they not more aware? Why has there got to be panic that morning and the night before all night?
It's
Maybe
like
you
they
could
have,
ask those questions.
it's like they have an entire presentation and everything set up for that exam, prepared to go on when it happens. Everything just switches things away.
It was more just a question about the thing you said about care leavers, and we don't know where the 1%. We have a thing where we don't know what 1% are doing, whether or not they're in education, employment, or training. I have a feeling I know the answer, but do we know why they're not in education? Why do we not know where what's going on with them? Like, is there any reason that we don't know? Because I feel like that we should know, and we just don't.
Another great question is why I'm really glad that we have youth council representation here as well. It's a really great question. In some cases, it could be that they've moved out of the area. And I don't mean that in an unfortunate way, that we haven't registered their interest yet. It's a really small number, and I'll come back to you on exactly how many that constitutes. It's really important to get that sense of context. It's a really small number. In some cases, it is because they moved, not followed. So they will have just advisors. Again,
So is that something that should be followed up more sooner then? That when they move over the transition to whichever area they're going to, that the new casework passes on the information, you can close that off.
We're already working.
Yeah.
And just to go back on the question about absence, when I say volunteer spent, are able to give your student points to that as well. They will ask you that, and they will distribute the question. Make sure that you do.
That's actually a problem that I wasn't thinking of bringing up to Ofsted was the fact that there's quite a lot of smokers at my college. Ofsted somehow never noticed this problem. All the smoking are forced off. Smokers, yeah. They're forced, it's a no smoke on campus now. So people keep getting kicked off out the front. Just if they're not going to smoke in shelter. People have to go right on the pathway next to the road, which is really close to gas shelter, which is very concerning.
Again, that's an issue that you have to take directly.
Councillor on Cheetham.
Thank you very much. Once again, very frank discussion on this. I go from one extreme to the other, but I just want to go back to early years, and also going on to primary. Obviously, your statistics are very interesting. In as much as that, sadly for me, one of my primary schools has been downgraded. Very upsetting indeed. And then I looked back a little further into the history, because this was one school where we had a nursery, and the nursery was withdrawn. That was 8 years ago, so 9 actually, 9, yeah. And I always felt this would be detrimental to the school, oddly enough. I don't know whether that would be a contributing factor in this case, but it is something that has caught me, and I've thought about it very hard this last week. But I am in an area where we do have 2 county nursery schools, both in very tough areas, I have to say, both of which have done very well, which goes to show that sometimes where there are hard surrounds which go with it, if parents have the confidence to think, I must aim for that nursery and the right qualifications, and in they go. And I think this is very, very important, that we retain those nurseries which are supported by Lancashire County Council, because I do think they are a good investment for our future education. They're leading into the primary schools, and I will certainly raise this other matter in another course of discussion. I just wanted to make that. Some of you may not have noticed in statistics within primary schools, we now are coming through with a generation of much older parents who, when I say older parents, who might be just embarking on their 50s, and yet they have little persons of 4 and 5-year-olds just starting school. Those parents do not understand phonics, and I would like there to be an urge within primary schools, whichever way you come from, be a governor, that we try and give more support for parents to understand what phonics are. And I think we would improve enormously. But I've heard this at 1 or 2 gates, which I found quite exciting, and had quite a discussion. And I thought, well, perhaps this is something we ought to try and encourage, particularly where a number of our primary schools do have PTAs. And I think this is something that we should just suggest that they start getting back together again and having their PTA associations within primary schools. And I think phonics would help enormously with the bedtime stories and everything else that goes with it. But I do think that might be a helpful contribution. I just put that forward as has come to my attention on the other side. But I do think that within our primary side, we do very, very well. And I think we've become much more adapted to helping children with learning difficulties within the primary schools and their peer group. And I noticed that was acknowledged in one of your statistics. So your encouragement, do not be frightened for any parent or grandparent or guardian who are trying to, you know, make sure that their children have the best advantage, whatever they might be. It is much better than it was when I was at secondary school, I can assure you. And, you know, just listening to one of ours, our fears was when we heard Her Majesty's Inspectors of Schools are coming in, we expect that. And I can assure you, it was talk about sprucing and rubbing up brasses, etc. That was so. Can I just say Ofsted seems very genteel in comparison, but there we are. Thank you.
Is there a shortage of male teachers? For the simple reason, in my area, I know one school and it's all female teachers, and the boys at the school, I mean, I know, for instance, that all the boys, when it was on COVID, were saying, oh, it's all fixed, it's the girls get it all the time, blah, 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 girls this, girls that. They left the school, went to the secondary school last year, and they have excelled at the boys because they've got male teachers. A lot of boys don't like going to female teachers in the last years of the junior school. So that's one thing I was concerned about. The other one is I have got one of the most fantastic nursery schools in my area. I wish I was young again because I'm not joking. This last week they have enjoyed rolling in the mud. Don't worry about the bacteria, just get there. It's excelled itself because it was brought up by Ofsted and it had only been just taken by the management, and Ofsted came in and gave it that, but now it's up there. I am not joking. There are some schools in this area where I am and they've excelled. But the problem I've got is with the male teachers, no male teachers. It seems to be, you know, no, they're very few and far between, and it's not fair on the boys. And I'm not being, I'd like to, you know, have a mixture of men and
Thank you for raising that point. It's a really interesting point. There are male teachers out there. Some of our primary schools have rather large proportion of male teachers out there. It's about the recruitment processes as much as anything else. And I don't want to go into a specific circumstance with an individual school. But it's about making sure that the recruitment processes enable a range of all sorts of different backgrounds, as well as that balance between men and women. So it's about making sure that you've got the best teachers for the school in that school.
I hope you're getting your husband on the governors. Get him on the school.
Well, absolutely. And just to say, in some schools where they don't have specific male teachers, they might bring in a sports coach. They might have some dads or uncles coming in doing reading with children. There's all sorts of different ways in which you can get other male role models within schools, not just as teachers. It's about having that breadth.
You could be on the chair of governors, make a decision. Councillor Jennifer Main, please.
Thanks, Chair. Just going back to, I'm sorry about this, but the care leavers, and the 5% last year and the 1% this year, that you don't know whether they're neat because you don't know where they are. I do find it disturbing. And the question is, how long have you not known where they are? So, you know, I think that's something that we should really, really be concentrating on, because I thought we had a duty actually. As you said, that they've got mentors and support workers. We really need to, you know, if they've disappeared, we need to know very quickly where they've disappeared to. But going back to the changes on the Ofsted report, I think actually Councillor Salter asked this question, and I don't think it was responded to, about the new section on harmful sexual behaviour and how does that manifest itself in an Ofsted inspection.
Again, that's not something that I'm going to go into in full detail here, because that's something that I think needs to be covered in a bite size about Ofsted itself.
So I think we need to agree with Jenny that there is need for male role models, and it's about variety. So we also need to look at the LGBT plus community. You know, we have been really neglecting education, and where are our mentors? You know what I mean? So I think we need to look in recruitment and selection about how we get the best person for the job. You know what I mean? And then what additional benefits they bring. So that's the first thing. The other thing is that, you know, from a Catholic's perspective, the only male role model who is a governor is, of course, the parish priest. But my parish priest is in his 60s, and he won't be much of a role model as such. So I think if we can, as the message has been from the front bench here, become governors, we could be our own champions for our own schools and our own areas. And I just wondered how these boards are made up, you know, who could join, and, you know, because I'm on the health committee as well. You know, is it community people? Is it, you know, schools? Is it, you know, how does that work?
I just wanted to come back on the Catholic aspect of that, because I'm a governor at a Catholic school, and the youngest teacher there is the head teacher, and he's male.
I'd just like some clarification on which board were you talking about?
The locality boards and the second board. You know, there's two, isn't there?
Yeah, they're not boards that, I'll be circulating the information about what they are. They're not working in that function, if you see what I mean. Yeah.
Thomas?
Yeah, it's just about what Stuart said about including LGBT representative, like role models as well. For example, in my high school, I went to Latham, and all the teachers were very well versed. Even if it's not specifically an LGBT teacher, it's at least someone who's well versed in it. Because I had a mini friend group, really, with size group, and it was full of members of the LGBT community, myself included, and there was also another person who is trans who was able to come out because of PE teacher. The female PE teacher was incredibly supportive the entire way through, helped them all the way through, and it was so amazing to see, because they're so comfortable. They go to my college as well, and he loves it.
I just coming in on what Thomas said, I went to a Roman Catholic college, and like they did the whole mass, and we had our own chapel and faith garden and everything. And as soon as we left, the amount of people in my year that came out to be part of the LGBTQ community. But I feel like because of that limitation of it being a Catholic school, even though they include it, it wasn't there enough for them, I think.
Yeah, just going off the back of what was just said by Thomas and Amber, and I went to a Catholic high school as well, and it was really weird because it was like they'd go on about in our lessons how Catholics believe that it's okay to be part of the LGBTQ community, but don't act on it. And then you'd have like straight couples in the corridor, like public displays of affection, which nobody wanted to see anyway. But if it was like, but if I gave a hug to one of my female friends, you've got detention for the next 3 days. You're in lunchtime isolation. It's not appropriate. How dare you? Like, and it was almost, and it was just horrible. And the depression rate at my school, especially in the LGBT community, was just horrific. It was really bad. It was really bad, and there was like no support at all. And it was, well, I say no support. There was only the chaplain was the most supportive person there, and like you could come out to her and be fine about it. But like if a student needed support with like coming out or their identity and that, they taught, like we had a thing where year 11s would support the year 7s. So like the year 7s would quite often come to the year 11s and like ask for support because they felt like they couldn't ask for it between the members of staff. And my school had a habit of outing students to the parents when they knew they were LGBT, which was, and then they'd wonder why that they wouldn't trust staff, and it was horrible.
Thank you for your comments. I think times are moving on from when we went to school, say from Alan to me to everybody else. Things are changing, things are moving on, and it's all the different world that we all live in. And when you come as our age, you'll see it totally different again, and you'll sit there and think, oh, when I did. We have to move on because of time limits. I did say we'd finish at 12:30 and it's 10:02. So the recommendations today that I can take is to consider all the information presented, to the cabinet member for education to write to the school clusters to further, I forgot what I put there, highlight the support available to schools in relation to the COVID catch-up funding. So I think that's important that the cabinet member writes to them. We get that word out, we see what's going on, we make sure we get it right. Bite-sized briefings on Ofsted inspection changes and looking at harmful sexual behaviour under that column. Councillor Hearn, I can't stop you. Finally, come on.
Sorry about this. Is it too late to discuss the Heathcourt matter? Heathcourt, a private school in Accrington, went into liquidation a couple of weeks ago. Is it nothing? I'm just a little bit concerned about the students that haven't got a place in it.
All happy with the recommendations? Yes, no problems. Right. I'd like to thank you both for a very long morning. Been a bit longer, half an hour longer than normal, but at least we've had plenty of contribution. We've listened to people's points. We're going to look at the funding. We're going to look at the be ready for school. Everything's going to move forward. So thank you very much for coming along. And you're going to give us an update that I can put forward for the next meeting.
Yes, absolutely. And thanks, Sammy, for your contributions. It's really important that we're all engaged together in supporting our children and young people through the education strategy that we all agree together, and just implementing those really key 5 priorities. It's really important.
So if we're all happy to recommend this report that's come forward and we're happy with it. All right then, so I'm pleased to say you can go and get a cup of tea. So item 5 is the work programme for 21-22. So it's to discuss and agree the work programme, to consider key lines of inquiry for future meeting topics, and to discuss any additional representation required from key officers and partners. Now, on the next meeting, we have got, which is the 16th of March, road safety, and we will have our rapporteurs, which are Julia, Ron and Rupert. Now, in my head, when you were talking about this, I thought, why don't we invite Andy Pratt along? He is working on the highway, on road safety on the highways. So I think it'd be good to get his contribution and see if he'd like to come to the meeting. I don't know if you've already interviewed him. If not, let's have him along and let's see what he can say. So hope that you're working hard at that and you're ready for that next meeting. I'm really looking forward to it. Gone, let's turn over my sheet. Lost me the number. Got number 16 somewhere. There it is. Shaping Care Together will also be on the next meeting with an NHS update. So we could look at that as well. Nothing else on that. Is there any bite-sized brief that's coming up next? No. So Sam's going to take all the information we've put forward today and see, can we just have, so thank you to our young people. We're happy to let you go now. We'll see you again. And I think your hair is absolutely wonderful. Don't know how you've got so many colours in like that, but it's beautiful. So we do appreciate that you come along, join in and take part. Do go to your colleges and universities, suss out what's going on, make your voice prominent. And then, so we're happy to let you go now while I just have a meeting with the rest of the team. Is that okay? Well, we'll see you next time. Thank you. Have a safe journey home. And thank you for supporting them. Have we got any urgent business? Everybody's happy. Is there anything we're missing off our list? Is there anything you've got a burning issue that you would like to talk about or that you want to come up that we're not covering? Jennifer?
There is a steering committee, isn't there, for this? No.
No, no.
So it's not like the house scrutiny. Pardon? Sorry, just looking at the programme of you know, what's coming forward, what we're going to scrutinise, and is this something that everybody has had you know, the whole committee has had a chance to?
You mean the next meeting?
Yeah.
No,
not just the next meeting.
Oh.
No, the whole, the full timetable.
Every meeting this is brought up.
Yes, yeah.
And if anybody wants to say anything or has a burning issue, they usually email me and I try and fit it in. Or we have a bite-sized briefing on it if we can't do it.
Yeah, every meeting, and that's quite dynamic. I think last meeting we brought in these extra deep diving into issues that are critical to us. It's changed, and we're keeping track of the decisions we've made. So you know, it's only as good as you like. You don't ever feel that you can't speak up. And I just think the structure we operate is very, very helpful. You know, not meaning at the beginning of the meeting to when we have that period of time where we're organising questions. That's not a limiting.
That's to get you to talk, because a lot of you don't want to talk, and it's the only way I can do it. And I write your name down as soon as you say something, and you know I'm going to come and point to you, which I was waiting for Terry before the end. I was going to say, spoke again.
And the thing is, it doesn't scrutiny is just not in
Are we offering it now?
Scrutiny is not just in this meeting, but with all that, the things we're passionate about. And you know, it is really, really dynamic. It's down to what the effort we put into stuff. Don't ever feel that you're doing a job of work, something going on in your district that you need to know about. Let's talk to each other a lot more and be those change makers. I think this is probably is the best student meeting there is in this building at this moment.
We do want it. We do want to know about your area, your voice, if you don't get the answer that you want, well, let's find out what it is and let's work together to get it. Sorry, Jenny, just before you do.
I hope you don't just mean your area as in your location, you mean your area of interest.
Yeah.
But the additional topics identified, child poverty, I raised that about at least 6 months ago, and I'm wondering when it's going to move up to become more than an additional topic and be something that we scrutinise.
It is on additional topics to come forward, so we have got it on there, child poverty to come forward. So you want us to bring that forward? Look into that and have a look at the plan and bring it forward.
Can I just acknowledge something else that's not been mentioned today about scrutiny first that came to council and came to governments, audit risk governments, that's called. So, this committee set the standard really, sort of ability to like pick up things like embracing and give it some time. No decision should be going to cabinet or council that hasn't come to scrutiny first. External audits of that open the governance committee 110% behind it. That really good work having this scrutiny, educate the education director around engagement, which means that we're all learning, everyone's learning, officers and members, and it is to be applauded. And I'd love to see this model in our district councils who often do scrutiny after decisions being made, which is just a bit sad. And let's get our own scrutiny into shape as well. Not let subject matters important get left behind.
Jenny, what do you want out of child poverty?
Report on where we are with it and what we're doing about it, because I think a lot of the reports that you read, the numbers of children actually living in poverty has drastically increased since the start of the pandemic. We had a high number in Lancashire anyway. We want to know how it's increased and what we're doing about it, what services we provide.
Let me just have a think how we can fit, where we can fit that in. Councillor Jones.
This is a bit of an odd one, and it could probably go on to the additional items. I want to see how we're doing at all stages in terms of attainment. So, like sort of key stage 1, early years, and primary and secondary, and how they get into, further education. Because when she was talking before about all these numbers and figures, my niece and nephew tell me about it all the time. And when I was homeschooling my godson, I had no clue about, on his iPad they got for the Apple Academy, which is a student of, I had no clue of what the syllabus was because it's changed so much. So it'd just be an idea of, somebody, say, in a primary school needs to get so many, like she said, number 4 or number 1 or whatever it is, just to understand how that works compared to sort of GCSE and how schools are performing and how we can sort of, understand it and support them.
We'll look into that.
I'm just coming in. That was the last school. Teachers looking in there.
I don't think that's how we're to define. No, not going to say. No. Matthew, did you speak? Hold on.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. I wanted to come in similar. I think similarly to Councillor Mann, I was a little bit surprised that we've got certain issues on the additional topics that maybe have been there for a while. And I suppose I had a couple of comments. One is that there are a number of topics there that have been identified for bite-sized briefings. It might be helpful to have them separately as perhaps on the bottom of bite-sized briefings table you have upcoming bite-sized briefings so that it would just make it visually clearer. But the other point I was going to make is that some of these could perhaps be topics that could be brought to committee meetings and that might be relatively short. So I've noted on our upcoming committee meetings, apart from April, we tend to have one item on the meetings. So, I mean, for instance, I would like to see the SEND COVID recovery bullet point rather than a bite-sized briefing. I think it would be useful to have that as an item at the committee meeting. I don't think it would necessarily be a long committee item, unlike the two that we've had today, and so it could be slotted in to one of the meetings. But I actually think it would be useful to have the opportunity for the committee to discuss that rather than just that being a bite-sized briefing. So I suppose, the similar thoughts in terms of the impact of COVID on child poverty, that could be an item that you could slot into one of the meetings. Those were my comments.
I just come back in, I touched on it briefly about the recent training that the council talked about public health and preventative measures that we as health ambassadors, and we should all be health ambassadors at Saturday, will be not resting until it's signed you all up to go back to your divisions and have a look at things like food provision, what, you know, the whole big topic about food and like I say, the poverty issue, you know, is all down to, you know, there's a lot of things going on in public health where we can have some significant interventions at neighbourhood level, working with our district councils. It's not just about the county council delivering, though we've got the health remit. You know, this new thing about Active Lancashire, it's Active Lancashire that's going to be joining Lancashire County Council Health and districts with their leisure remit. You know, there's a lot of joined up work and collaborative work that can be done, and yeah, let's give it that big label, poverty, and let's look at all the things within that. But I think it's bigger than this committee. It really is. It's just in all of them. But I think if we take the lead from what SAP is trying to introduce, actually it's been 10 years since we had a similar thing, which is around health champions. When we had a fantastic guy called Lab Singh, who's probably known to many of you, that was just absolutely leading on it. SAP is our king now. Just sign up for that training, and you'll learn very, very quickly when you see the data. You know, even if it's 2009 data about the health determinants for life in your division, all really available. Just ask for it. You'll send through your 2019 Office of National Statistics data, and it will then give you where you need to focus. You know, whether it's about school readiness things popped up everywhere, you know, older people with heart attacks and still smoking tipped up at the other end. You know, people are talking about obesity, but you know, in other areas we've got undernourished and hungry children. You know, all got things in common, and just need to sort of like pick up the baton and run with health. Yeah, really, really good.
Yeah, well, so in my area, looking at up there, very best to 60, or patients that got the health plan, which I was quite shocked at, but I think, well, I haven't got the right. So it's quite scary to me to get happy with doing. It's too hard days into it.
It will come back because there's been such good feedback from the ones that have been on it, and you know, it's about sharing it with your colleagues and getting them all signed up. It's not everybody's thing, but actually it gives you a real focus. You know, the fact that 10 years on, you know, if you've been a councillor for a long time, you look at it and think, oh my goodness, whatever I'm doing, I've made no difference. That is quite shocking. And it gives you, you know, a wake-up call to reflect on what we're doing at both county level and district level. Yeah, she'll sort it out.
Because I've asked for my other two areas, because they gave me the family, so family area, and I wanted to
Both sides.
where the families information, I wanted to see what they did. Definitely, it's quite shocking to me. I start to appreciate that, because I'm going to explain what they but it's not, it's just like eating everything, something like
Yeah, we need this needs to be annually reported to us. We shouldn't have to be asking for it, and I'm just really glad that council took this initiative on last whatever. It's absolutely yes.
Can I?
yeah, I think it's right. So between you both, the point game is and certified. So you don't think we're just like, I'm left out of the way.